My name is Patrick. I am 21 years old. I'm originally from the east coast of Canada, but I've been living here in Ireland for the past 4 years now. My story kind of starts with my parents' story. When they were young adults, then they did net ministries in the States. And my mom is American, my dad's Canadian, and so because they were put on the same team, like they got to know each other, and a couple of years later got married and had 7 children, of which I'm the oldest. And because they were missionaries, the way that they raised me and my siblings was very much with a missionary mindset. And so I always, believed in God and always went to Sunday school, did the normal Catholic things, Mass every Sunday, confession around once a month. And this was all good. And I remember my parents always told me God loves you and he wants to have a relationship with you. And to a certain degree, I knew what that meant, but I didn't, because you had a relationship with somebody that you talked to, and I didn't know how to talk to God because I couldn't see him. So as a kid, it didn't make sense. But at the same time, I still wanted to have a relationship with God. Growing up, I always kind of felt I suppose a bit of an outcast. I was never really bullied, but just felt different, I suppose, to the other kids. I remember there was this one time where there was this one kid, and he came up to me. He's like, "Patrick, I don't think I've ever seen you not smiling." And some people might take that as a compliment, it means that they're happy, but to me, something just kind of hit me. It's why did that person point that out to me? What makes me different that I'm always smiling? And so I just kind of became very self-conscious. So because my parents were telling me God loves me and wants to have a relationship with me, and because I kind of felt like an outcast, I wanted that relationship with God, but I didn't know what it meant. And so I would go to all these retreats, all these conferences, searching for understanding as to how I can talk with God, I suppose. And I'd go to these retreats, these conferences, and the speakers would always be God loves you, he wants to have a relationship with you, the same things that my parents were saying. Just ask him to show you that he loves you. And I was like, okay. And so I'd be like, God, show me that you love me. And I always expected God to come down in thunder and lightning and be like, Patrick, I love you. That never happened, unfortunately. Instead, so I continued asking and asking and asking, because that's what my parents told me to do. That's what the speakers told me to do. And God wasn't showing up in that way, but I was still seeking because it's what they were telling me what would happen. And I remember there was this one retreat specifically, it was a week long. On the Wednesday of the week, then we went into a time of adoration. And during that time of adoration, there was, praise and worship music. I had just been to confession, and I just was in a very peaceful place. And I remember the song "How He Loves" was playing, and my dad had always loved the song, so it was kind of sentimental to me. I was just listening to the words, and I was like, okay, God, show me how much you love me. And I remember just sitting there in silence, and I just remember this feeling of peace, and all these memories started to kind of just go around my head. Memories of when kids kind of made me feel like that outcast, and when I felt different, and when I felt, I suppose, the weird one of my friend groups and stuff like that. And I was kind of shocked at these memories, but then in that, God was just I don't care. And it was so interesting because, I said, I always expected God to show up, thunder, lightning. But instead it was this voice that wasn't a voice, saying, Patrick, I don't care about what everybody else thinks of you. I don't even care about what you think about yourself. I do love you. What your parents have said, what these speakers at these retreats have said is true. I do love you, and I want to have a relationship with you. And I just remember being filled with, like I said, just this overwhelming peace. And I left that retreat definitely changed, definitely new. But at the same time, with this, new level of relationship with God came its challenges. And I definitely, to this day, still struggle with who I am. And I experienced that when I was around 14. And especially when you're kind of that age, I feel identity and who you are really kind of becomes a challenge. And so I was definitely challenged as to who I was. But that moment where God told me he doesn't care what other people think about me, just that he loves me, has always stuck with me. And it's always a moment that I can turn back to and realize how much God loves me. And no matter what I do, doesn't change that, that he's always going to love me no matter what. And so, I just encourage people, anybody that is listening, to just ask God to show you that he loves you. And it's easy to expect him to show up in thunder and lightning because he's God. But I recently heard that God's love language is silence. And so give him the silence that he needs, because a conversation is obviously speaking and listening. Give God the silence that he needs to actually speak to you and really truly show you who you are.